Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the At the Coalface podcast with me, Jason Greenwood, your host. It's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast today. We've got Subbu Varadarajan, and he is the founder and CEO of Zycada Networks. Welcome, Subbu.
Hey, Jason. First of all, I want to start by saying thank you so much for having me on your show. I've seen many of your episodes, and I love the fact that you are educating the entire e-commerce group on how complex this platform is. And I always walk away learning something new from your podcast. So I'm glad that I'm now having an opportunity to educate the e-commerce group about how they can benefit by optimizing the delivery side of the e-commerce site.
Fantastic. And look, I'm really excited to have you here. This is something that, again, as you point out, what I try to do is I try to ask the questions that I think the audience would normally ask if they were in my shoes, and trying to help them understand a little bit more of the technical side of e-commerce and omnichannel, and particularly through the lens of that sort of technical experience and technical background that I have. That's what I'm really trying to bring to the table. And if we look at Zycada, we're really talking about, as I understand it, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, we're talking about a CDN platform that offers, or a content delivery network platform, as it's commonly known in the industry. But you have a whole series of productized services that are wrapped around that CDN that do other things apart from just providing content, static content and the like at the edge network around the world. But you also are bringing things like, you've got productized components or modules that are part of your content delivery network and service layer, which you've got your cloud service orchestrator, you've got an accelerator, you've got a cloud service shield, a last mile accelerator, a cloud service monitoring service, cloud storage as well, load balancing, A/B testing, and a bunch of other services that are wrapped around that kind of CDN layer. And it almost, I guess, if we were to use a platform that maybe somebody's heard the name of before, if we were to talk about Cloudflare, they offer almost like a CDN proxy service and other modules around that. And it feels like you're very similar in the sense that you offer the CDN, you offer these services, and you offer an end-to-end solution for web acceleration.
Jason, I would say, first of all, kudos. I know I'm coming from the CDN industry. The way you explain the problem, the way you explain the feature set of a CDN, it's just spot on. So I got to say, awesome job there. And coming from the CDN, fundamentally, I'm a technical person also like you. And I believe that we don't have to solve the same problem twice. CDNs have done a phenomenal job when it comes to delivering or accelerating static content, whether it's your CSS pages, JavaScript, HTML pages. CDNs are great at them because they understand that if the same content can be consumed by everybody, then you don't need to go all the way back to the mothership or the origin. And so by caching them much closer to the consuming endpoint, they were not only reducing the load on the origin, but they were also making things faster for the consuming endpoint. The way Zycada is different is, instead of using caching technology, like how a CDN would cache content, they use disks to store the content and they make things faster. We employ compute. So we have a whole bunch of bots. And what these bots do is they understand how your buyers, e-commerce buyers, interact with the site. And we understand what matters to them. And we use that intelligence, if you will, to get the dynamic content, the non-cacheable portion of the e-commerce site, we get them ready even before the user asks for it. So in an ideal world, I would argue that customers must use a top CDN like Cloudflare for static content, and they should complement their stack with Zycada, which is a dynamic side of the CDN. And you can now get the fastest e-commerce experience on the internet. So where in some way you can look at us as a complementary technology to a CDN. But if you're a customer who only wants to have one CDN, we also offer caching capabilities like Cloudflare.
Wow, exciting stuff. Now, for the audience's benefit, let's just break open the onion a little bit here, and let's talk about what, at the most foundational level, a basic run-of-the-mill CDN that is a global CDN is designed to do, whether you're talking about an on-premise platform or a SaaS platform that has its own CDN built in. Let's unpick that a little bit. And I'm just going to describe how this typically works. And then again, poke holes in it. Feel free to add your own thoughts. So CDN, Content Delivery Network. Now, what this is typically a network of computer web servers and other types of content servers around the world that are sited close to major population centers in cities around the world. And what happens is that when a website has its own, as you call it, the mothership, which might be a central server somewhere in the world, again, whether that's a SaaS platform and they may have 1 or 2 or 3 data centers around the world, and your site may be hosted in one of those data centers, or if it's a self-hosted platform and you have it hosted on AWS somewhere around the world and you have your delivery zone set to, say, Sydney or LA or somewhere around the world, your website is hosted on usually a single web server or a couple of web servers in a data center located in one single physical location. And let's say that happens to be Los Angeles. And let's say someone down in New Zealand tries to access your website that's hosted in a data center that's in Los Angeles. That's a hell of a long way for the data to come down the Pacific cable there, come down or via satellite or whatever it might be, down to the local computer when they request a page on the website, whether it's a home page, a category page, product page, doesn't matter. When they request information from that hosting web server, it's got to come a long physical distance before it can be displayed on a customer's computer screen. Now, there's a couple of components to this in terms of the observed performance. We've got latency of the first byte, and we've got latency of first paint. We've got the DOM aspect. So there's a whole lot of technical aspects to this that create an end result of the perception of how fast a web page loads. And there's things that can be done on the front end of the website and in the coding to make it more efficient in terms of requiring less data to load. But at the end of the day, physical distance still plays a massive part in how long it's going to take that data to come down the pipe and be presented to the customer. So what a CDN typically does is these additional supplementary servers are sitting all around the world, close to major population centers and major cities. And what those CDNs are designed to do is to fetch, as you say, generally speaking, all of the static content, the content that it doesn't have to be pulled in real time from a database. So it might be the standard web pages, the info pages. It might be some of the font packs, the JavaScript. It'll be the images from the website. It'll be some of the static content, the actual textual content from a website. So there's a lot of content from a given website that doesn't have to be pulled in real time from a database or calculated and merged together with some of the static content to present to the customer. And those edge nodes, what's known as edge nodes, those edge servers around the world, they go and grab that static content from the mothership server. They store it local to the end consumer. And then the only thing that actually has to come from the mothership is the dynamic content or the dynamic data. So the pricing data, for example, the inventory data, the shopping cart information, and the stuff that is unique to that customer and or has to be pulled in real time, because otherwise, if you don't pull it in real time, we're not getting the relevant, appropriate data to present to the customer. And so that's the typical role of a CDN. And in fact, if we look at Shopify or BigCommerce or Salesforce Commerce Cloud or VTEX, and even these SaaS platforms, they typically have their own global CDN that they leverage, even if it's a third-party CDN that's integrated by default, like maybe it's Google Cloud, maybe it's, again, Cloudflare, or some one of those other third-party CDNs. They integrate out of the box with their platform as part of the solution, so that when you upload images, say, for example, to your Shopify website, or you upload content to your Shopify website, they automatically populate all that static content that doesn't need to be pulled in real time out to their inbuilt out-of-the-box CDN. And the concept behind that is to try to make the felt experience of the end consumer feel much faster, because there's certain things you can serve up immediately, while behind the scenes you're continuing to pull the dynamic data from the database in real time from the mothership to merge together for that front-end experience. So I know that was a lot to talk about, but I think it was really important to lay the foundation of what a CDN typically does even in a SaaS environment that's provided by the vendor. And so I think it's really important for people to understand that underlying idea of a CDN and the fact that CDNs as a concept have been around for a very long time. And it's not just e-commerce websites that use CDNs. It could be your blog. It could be any type of website really can leverage a CDN for that static content component. Is that correct?
That is absolutely the way we want to think of. Generally speaking, if you are running an e-commerce, it has been well studied and proven that as little as 100 millisecond reduction, it's the time that you take to blink your eye. As little as 100 millisecond reduction in latency can boost your top line revenue by 1%. And this was proven by top e-commerce giants like Amazon, I think, published a paper. Walmart published a paper around that. Google has papers that talk about how reducing latency boosts the search engagement. So it's well studied. And which is why, if you are running an e-commerce shop, which is a very cutthroat industry, you need to figure out every leverage that you can give your business. One simple way to do that would be like exactly like what you mentioned, Jason, is to go and get a CDN if you don't have one already. That would immediately give you two advantages. Like Jason, like you mentioned, Jason, you're going to make the site faster overall, which is beneficial. You're going to also protect your mothership from attacks. That's the two big advantages that CDNs will give you. And they do a great job at doing that. And the problem would have been like a solved problem if we all lived in 1998. But what happened was we moved to what I call a dynamic world. I joke around that Google knows what I am going to buy even before I know that I'm going to buy it. But jokes aside, I think our algorithms and technology have advanced to a level that e-commerce industry also adopted this new dimension called personalization. Now we personalize our users, our buyers, to make sure that we give them a richer buying experience. All those personalizations are dynamic, non-cacheable content. We need to know who you are, what you searched, what are the things you typically like, and all of that would go into a product recommendation or a product listing page. With the other complex things, Jason, that you mentioned, like looking at the logistics, looking at dynamic pricing, coming up with the most relevant page near real time so that we can give the users maximum advantage so that they can get the best experience. All the stuff that I talked about that cannot be present or that cannot be stored in a CDN because they are dynamic. So let's go to the same example that you mentioned in your use case, where the mothership or the origin is in LA and the user is consuming this data from, say, New Zealand. Basically, the way I want all of us to imagine the race to paint your page, it's not a sprint where all the images and JavaScript and everything, just all the requests from your browser just runs in parallel, and then the CDN gets the content, they deliver the static content, and then the dynamic content goes back all the way to the mothership while the browser renders the static page. That would have been a good design, but that is not how things really work. It actually works like a relay race. And what I mean by that is the very first call that goes is almost always dynamic. Why? Because they need to put the banner in place and they need to understand if there are some flash sales going on, and all of that are dynamic content. So that has to go all the way to the mothership. Now you are incurring a computational cost where you're looking at the database, you are assembling the content, looking at personalization, getting the JSON ready. That comes all the way back, or HTML comes all the way back to your browser. Then the browser would parse that content, build the DOM. Now the race starts where you get the static content. So almost it feels like, even though CDN has done a great job at accelerating static content, as an industry, we failed to understand the impact of dynamic content. And we now know that's about 5 to 10% of your revenue. By not optimizing the dynamic content, you are leaving that to the table. So that's how I see the industry, Jason. So from the browser to going back to your industry, to your use case, even if you're using a CDN, even if you're on BigCommerce or Salesforce Commerce Cloud or Adobe Magento, those clouds are in US. And as a global e-commerce buyer, if you're selling to your buyers in New Zealand or Australia or Asia, they have to traverse a long way, which is just the network latency. but they also need to incur the computational latency, which could add in the neighborhood of 500 to 1000 millisecond. And we need to figure out how to make that latency go away. And that's why we started Zycada.
How, just if we unpick this a little bit further, so how, from a technical perspective, how does your platform, how is it able to do this? How is it able to effectively cache like a normal CDN? How is it able to pre-compile that content that would normally have to be dynamic, meaning it has to go back to the mothership to request and compute that information, send it down the pipe and render it? How does your service create an opportunity to effectively locally cache or locally serve from a local computer, a local edge point, a local server to the person who's requesting that page? How does your system fundamentally create an opportunity to cache that dynamic content as if it was static and serve it up as if it was a local piece of content with a local distance and local latency? And specifically, how does it do that in an environment where a system or a platform may already have a CDN, and how does it not conflict with that existing CDN that may already be integrated?
Yeah, so I will start with how our system works, and then I will talk about how we integrate with the existing CDN. So the first question is, we basically looked at what is contributing to the latency when a page is getting loaded, and we figured out that CDNs, almost all the top CDNs like Cloudflare, Fastly, Akamai, like all of them, they do a phenomenal job. They deliver content, they have a solid SLA when it comes to static content. It just works. But what we realized was the dynamic content, the way the industry has solved that problem is they would say, let me find the best route to your mothership. So if you are in Amazon, or if you're on AWS or Azure or Google Compute Cloud, we would figure out the fastest route to get to your origin. And that's the way we actually help you in the process. And then the burden is thrown to in this case, the e-commerce app maker, where you need to figure out how to put the database in place and all of that. But those things could only get you so much, because you still have to, it's still a reactive. What we were looking at was to give you a little bit of a background from how we stumbled onto this problem, Jason, is like I have experience. I have worked in Akamai and Limelight Networks, which gave me a lot of CDN experience. Then I moved to a company called Shape Security, which was a phenomenal company, brilliant people. And there, the job was to figure out how hackers use botnet and how they would use creative ways to launch an attack. I learned that hackers actually study the website, like how a real user would use the website. They would study that, and then they would use that information to launch an attack. And I was thinking, if hackers have this amazing tool like botnet, do good guys have something similar, right? That can actually even give the good guys a chance to fight the bad guys. And then I quickly realized that we don't have something that's very similar to what hackers use called a botnet. So that basically helped me create the world's first white hat botnet, which we call the Programmable Intelligent Edge. What it basically does is it learns real user behavior. So we have millions of bots. So if you connect to a website that's powered by Zycada, we have a bot that I'm going to call it a JSON bot. And then we will have a bot for Subbu. I'm going to call it Subbu bot. So every session a user comes, a new bot gets instantiated. The bot purely has only one purpose in life. How do I make Jason's experience better? That's the only thing that it focuses on. It understands your journey. It would understand how you're navigating from homepage to product page to PLP page to PDP page. What are the things you look at? We track your journey, but not you as a user, but we just do that in a very anonymized way. So we would understand how users typically would interact with the website. Then we take that information, and then we would go ahead and look at how your website itself is designed. And the bots would understand the heat map of the traffic, of the foot traffic that's coming to your e-commerce site. That will help the bot understand what are the pages that are typically most requested, what are the pages that are causing most delay. And based on a whole bunch of data-driven algorithms like machine learning and a lot of other statistical algorithms, we would understand that these are the pages that need to be prepared even before someone request for it. And then the bots would as you are browsing, the bots would be a step ahead of you and you'd get those pages ready. So by the time you as a buyer makes that request, our bots would have that content ready, and then it will blast those pages to you as if it's a static content. So that's how our technology works. So it's powered by a patented technology called Ruby, RUBI. We call that real user behavioral intelligence. And we use Ruby, and we understand how the apps are designed to give you the fastest e-commerce experience basically on the internet. I think the second question you asked was how your stack would complement the CDN stack. So we have about 60% of our customers, when they started to test and try Zycada, they loved it so much. They basically came back and asked, do I need another CDN or can you guys cache them as well? So basically the request came from the customers and we started giving them caching functions too for the static content. But for the other 40% who wants to retain that CDN, like not just individual big customers, but customers who are on Commerce Cloud and BigCommerce, what we basically did was we asked them to change the DNS JSON, where the DNS would point to Zycada and we would point straight back to the CDN. So basically for CDN, it's completely transparent. So the traffic would come to us. We would dial the traffic to the CDN as if that's our mothership. But our bots would still do all the benefits of fetching the content, caching the content, preparing the dynamic content, synthesizing them so that the user gets the best experience. That's how we complement it. So basically, we don't disrupt anything that you have done with your CDN, but we complement it.
So many exciting things that drop out of the backside of everything you just said. A very interesting concept, and I love the way that you describe that as almost like it's almost like thinking like when we think of these distributed denial of service attacks, right? We've got these distributed bots all around the world that pretend that they're a real user, and they go to websites and they smash the website with these standard user journeys, which is the whole idea behind that is to make it difficult to detect that whether this is a human being that's navigating the website or whether it's a bot navigating the website. And that's why those existing CDNs like your Cloudflares and your Akamais, et cetera, they've gotten very good at identifying what are bots and what aren't. And so therefore they can block those IP addresses. Now, when you said that you guys track those sort of standard user journeys and you track it down even into the individual user level. So I'm guessing that you also track that based on IP address. I'm guessing that's the way in which you're crafting these experiences for individual users and accelerating the stuff that's important to them is because the IP addresses that are coming in through your system and making the requests. Is that a correct assumption that you do track those requests by IP address?
We initially, when we wrote the initial prototype JSON, we took a shortcut where we said, hey, let's just do the IP addresses to have a sense. And then we got in smarter by getting help from our customers. Then our customers said, hey, these are the cookies that we identify. Then we started giving our own cookies. So now we have a more session-based awareness, not just IP-based JSON. So if you have 2 laptops in your house, and you have 2 separate sessions, we can identify both the sessions, even though the outside IP would still be the same. But we can still track and understand that you will have 2 separate sessions that's coming to us even with the same IP address. And like you said, the behavioral analysis is essentially what gave us the insight into what type of content needs help. And the same intelligence can be used to fortify our security services. So we have this cloud security shield. It basically what it does is, apart from giving you WAF services and like the DDoS protection, we are taking it up a level. We are trying to change the unit economics of the attack, where we want to make it expensive for the hacker to launch an attack, and we want to make it cost effective for the good guy to stop an attack. So the way we have done the system is, since our bots understand how typically a good guy behaves, so if the bots are behaving something in a strange way, like if they're doing things that are not consistent with the typical user behavior, we actually tag those requests. And if our customers have their own security system in the backend, most of them do, then they actually request us to set some headers, a special header that they request us to set. We set those headers. They go and get those requests under the scrutiny of other security systems that they have. And once they understand that, hey, yes, you guys are right, these are really bad, then they give us a signal that you guys can start to kill those requests. So we go in the enforcement, we go in a warning mode, and then once our customers gives thumbs up, we go into an enforcement mode. This is apart from the WAF and apart from the DDoS protection, we are giving an enhanced security called app security. That's part of our cloud security shield. That's going to be a real game changer for us, Jason. We have a lot of exciting things coming down our product roadmap in Q2 of this year.
Super exciting. And if we think about the death of third-party cookies, obviously, if you're tracking these individual user sessions based on cookies that you set, and third-party cookies ultimately go away in the next, say, 2 years because Google kills them off, how does that impact your business? And then the second question I have on the backside of that is that a lot of these platforms, like your Shopify's and your BigCommerce and your Salesforce Commerce Clouds, they've got an app ecosystem that's wrapped around them. And on your average Shopify site, I think the average is about 10 apps, third-party apps that are installed. Some of those are promo apps, some of those are personalization apps, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not just latency created by Shopify that we have to address. It's also latency created by all of the JavaScript that is typically inserted into a website by these individual apps to allow them to do what they do. And in some cases, it's more than that. It goes beyond just JavaScript, but they also have to phone home to their own servers to grab content and data and information that also gets sent down. So those are two key questions I have: is what will you do in a world where third-party cookies are dead and don't exist anymore and go the way of the dodo? And secondarily, how do you additionally assist those SaaS environments where they do have an extensive app ecosystem, and every one of those apps will typically add an element of latency to every single page load?
Two really interesting questions. So let me start with the first one. The cookies that we said, they will not be a third-party cookie. That will be first-party cookie, because we are actually front-ending the traffic, and the cookies that we said would be on the domains. But having said all that, Jason, since I am coming from the security world, I am not a big fan of cookie, and I know that hackers derive a lot of information from cookies. So we are helping our customers move to what I call cookie-less world, where we set the cookie, but the cookies will have a different meaning. So we would re-parse the cookie back to the origin. And we have given our customers the ability to derive meaning based on how they need to set. And the cookie that we set basically has no meaning for the browser. So if you're a hacker, you're looking at the cookie, you're not going to get a lot of information moving forward, because we're going to abstract all of that. Once the cookie comes back, we would re-parse them. So the cloud would still get, your mothership would still get all the information, but we are trying to limit the number of cookies and limit the exposure that you have, so that you are protecting your buyers as well as yourself from the prying. So that's one thing that, so yes, we are first party cookie, and I'm not a big fan of cookie. You're totally right about it. I think we should move the world to a cleaner side where we can actually live without the cookie. The second question that you asked was, I'm sorry,
third-party app.
I actually forgot the second question. What was the second one?
All the third-party apps and the latency that they introduce, particularly in an e-commerce environment where it takes a village, so to speak, and so therefore your average e-commerce website may have 10 apps loaded with them.
So we wanted to actually start to work with third-party critical sites that are adding so much value to our e-commerce site, so that they can be botified too. So the goal would be that if that can be integrated with what we call a bot development kit, we would be able to make those content faster as well. But that's a longer step. For a shorter step, we actually wanted to tell our customers that use tools like Lighthouse, the Google PageSpeed tools that you have, so that you can move those calls, if they are not really necessary immediately, move them below the fold, if you will, so that you first render the page, get the engagement going, while in the background, Jason, like you mentioned when we first started the conversation, you should have a separate JavaScript that downloads the third-party apps, third-party JavaScripts, and then they start to deliver value. Try to move as much out of the actual critical path, so that you can focus on what matters and you get the customer, the buyer engaged. Then you add richer services, right? You don't want to lose that buyer because you're spending so much money to get them on your site. So I would say use some best practices, tools that you have, open source, there are a ton of them. Use them so that you can remove the third-party latency.
Yeah, totally agree. And certainly front-end code and the cleanliness of that front-end code makes a massive difference, even in a SaaS environment, to how the perceived performance on the front end to first paint, particularly. So that first batch of content. So using smart technology like lazy loading, and there's all
Mhm.
sorts of what we would call trickery in the trade. But unfortunately, Lighthouse does see past a lot of that trickery, or in some respects, I actually think, and I'd love to get your opinion on this, I actually think Lighthouse is very deceptive. And the reason why it's deceptive is because every single Lighthouse session is treated as if it was a first browse, right?
Yeah,
And even when
very
we
true.
look at just standard out of the box browser technology with Chrome, Firefox, any of the major browsers, Safari, whatever, they all have browser side caching. And so once the JavaScript, for example, and the font kits and the whole 9 yards has been downloaded once for a website, that is stored browser side. And so sure, that first page that you hit, whether you followed a link from Google to the website, maybe you land on a long tail category page or a product page, sure, that first load might feel like it has a bit of latency associated with it, but every subsequent page load in that session is going to be dramatically faster because we're not going to reload all those libraries, for example, that we load on the first paint. We're never going to have
Mhm.
to load those again because they're stored by the browser. But Google doesn't accept that, I guess, as the standard of the web, which has become common across all dynamic websites, that this happens. And yet Lighthouse doesn't give any credence to that or respect to that whatsoever. And so I guess what you're saying is, hey, we're recognizing the fact that Google doesn't see the world the way that a real user would see the world after that first page. And so therefore, we're going to try to give Google a similar view of the world to what a cached browser user would see of the world. Is that kind of an understanding of kind of how you help Google to better position your website from a performance perspective and ranking perspective by giving them a more accurate view of the world?
Yeah, I mean, I would first start by agreeing with you 100%. That has been my biggest beef also with Lighthouse, because when you actually go and give a URL, you are really thinking of that as a first hit. It's not a continuation, it's not a part of a journey, but it's as if you are landing for the first time, which is completely academic at best. And it could be true for you if you're doing some deals and if you're actually running some promotions. Yeah, sure, those, for those use cases it might still be useful. But for a typical product like a PDP page or a PLP page someone browses as part of their journey, that tool is definitely lossy in that context. So I do agree with you. What I meant the Lighthouse is useful, I always say that like we should give a lot of credit to the developers, because they, like you said, they understand this pain, but they're living with the pain because unfortunately Lighthouse doesn't give them the option of, hey, this is part of the journey, it's already cached in the browser. They should really do a double fetch, if you will, on the same session so that they take care of this problem. But since it's not there, developers can, any session that Google flags, they can still weed them out and make the page lighter. It's more work for the developer, but I'm sure they will get there. What we wanted to do is slightly different. We actually tell our customers, we do the same kind of, the way you were actually educating Jason, I do the same thing on a lot of our customer calls. We would go there, we would show them, and they would say, hey, how will this work with Lighthouse? And then we exactly tell them like how you explained it to us. We would say, look, this, you are coming here for the first time, but that's not how it typically works. Even though it's advantageous for us to just show that we are actually faster, we still want to take the opportunity to help them understand there is a blind spot here and you need to be cognizant of the blind. So that I completely agree with you on that. The second point that you asked, why I am recommending the tool, is it still gives you a lot of insight on what's going on with your page. So if I like, since we are developers, we can understand what those errors mean, and we know that some are false positives because of the first load and it's not a continuation. We can ignore them, but it still gives us a lot of goodies that we can act on, which will make your site faster, especially when it comes to where to put the third party calls and stuff like that.
Yep, makes perfect sense. Now, with a traditional CDN, and I'd love to know whether this is the same with you guys, and I'm assuming it absolutely is, and it almost has to be, but we have what's called CDN warming, right? We have a
Mhm.
period of what's called warming the cache, right? The warming the CDN. And what that is, for the general audience out there who have never heard of this terminology before, it's the concept that all of those different CDN edge servers that are in those distributed locations around the world, until they can see a piece of content, they can't store it, they can't cache it, and they can't serve it. And so until someone local to that node or that local edge endpoint requests a page or requests a piece of content or requests a library from a website, that caching endpoint won't yet have that content flowing through it to be able to warm it. Now, some CDNs are more progressive in the sense that they will almost spider a website on CDN initiation, and they will actually, in fact, almost like on a cron, they'll go back and say once a week or once a day, whatever the case may be, and they'll effectively request all of those standard pages, similar to how the Googlebot would do. They crawl the website and they pull all that content down into their local CDN edge node, and then you have a much higher performing CDN. And usually CDNs will have either a manual warming phase or an auto warming phase, or some combination of the two, whereby they may have an auto warm for the initial loading of content, and then from then on, all the refreshes are done by all of the requests that are made to that endpoint, where it might have to check the timestamp, for example, of a piece of content, a static asset. It will check the timestamp on the server and say, okay, what we have is the most current version of that, so we don't need to go and retrieve it again, so we can save a whole bunch of time. Or no, actually, we don't have the latest version of this. We'll go down and retrieve that piece of content, so we have the most current version of that, and then we'll serve that up and cache it at the same time. Now, can you speak a little bit to your model of how do you warm your CDN? How do you refresh your CDN? What is the model that you guys use to ensure that you guys are always pulling and serving the most relevant current version of a page, including some of that dynamic content that you guys cache locally?
Definitely, Justin. I would say you were spot on. All the CDNs are reactive. So once a request comes, they know what to do. They know how to efficiently get them, cache them, deliver them to the end users. So they are really good at it. But coming from the CDN industry, as a CDN, I would say, technologist, the main metric that we used to worry about is what I call cache eviction. What is the cache eviction ratio? So we would always be looking at, hey, this particular server has all these caches. Like once you have, at that point, we had Netflix as our customers, not in the context of Zycada, but in the context of Akamai. And when those big names come in the evening, the prime time hits, that will be like a tsunami where it would cause a lot of cache eviction for a lot of CDNs. And it's a natural course for any CDN. As traffic comes from different websites, you have finite capacity at the edge. So what it means is that as other content gets heated up, it's going to compete for the space on your edge node, and the cache would get evicted, which means that the CDN has to again go ahead and refresh the content, not because they lost it or not because it's not there, but they just don't have room for it. So they have to go and get it. So what CDNs typically do is they have many tiers of servers. So if the cache gets evicted in one tier, they still want to make sure they don't go to the origin, because they want to reduce the load on the origin. So they have many of these tiers, and the cache gets evicted, and they refresh the cache. So it's like a constant battle between disk space and how do you warm up the cache. But what's missing in this equation, Jason, is the user. When a user requests, do the CDNs have the content ahead of them, or is it the function of this cache eviction and churn that's happening that they have to go retrieve the content for this user? So since I had the opportunity to work from the CDN world, I wanted to solve this problem. So we made our infrastructure proactive. So we are not a reactive engine, we are a proactive. What this gives us is, apart from getting the dynamic content ready, we also understand that every bot we have, you can imagine them like a cloud browser, right? A browser designed for the cloud. So what we basically do is not just pre-warm the dynamic content, we also get the necessary static content ahead of time. So our cache rate ratios are typically very high, even for static content compared to traditional CDN. So that's how we kind of act. So we do, the cache warming is very essential, like you said, but we just took that as instead of we spidering the website and stuff like that, we turned the lens towards the buyer. So we would say that this buyer is going to come. These are the things that he wants. We understand the nature, and we get the content ahead of time, warm them ahead of time. Even if it's a few seconds ahead of time, that's still worth it, because for the user, it's always warm and hot.
Love it. Look, it sounds like you took your foundational knowledge and experience of the CDN world, particularly at Akamai, who's one of the world's largest CDN networks, very well known, Cloudflare, very well known, all these major global CDN players, even Google Cloud now becoming very well known in the CDN space. You've taken this knowledge and understanding of the caveats or the chinks in the armor, so to speak, of your modern CDNs and the way that they operate. And you've effectively tried to say, hey, how can we turn this entire technology layer from a reactive technology layer to a proactive technology layer? And furthermore, how can we take this proactiveness and filter it through the lens of real users? And if we look at some of the features of the best monitoring, website performance monitoring platforms out there, we know that the likes of Uptrends, for example, I don't know if you've ever heard of Uptrends, but they have what's called real user monitoring. So they track the session performance of specific users around the world as part of their website monitoring service. So they've got, you can have synthetics where you can have a customer journey tracked in Uptrends, where they'll have a synthetic browser that will go through, and it will go from homepage to a category page to a product page to cart and checkout, so that we can track the length of time across that user journey and report on that. And if it gets outside of certain averages, then it alerts. We can have real user monitoring. When it gets outside of certain averages, it alerts, or at least it tracks that over time. And then we can have individual, basically JavaScript-based monitoring from the server side. If it's an on-premise technology, there's other ways we can monitor it. But Uptrends, I think one of the things is that their real user monitoring feature is one of their best features, and why you're willing to usually pay more for real user monitoring versus those synthetics, because we're actually seeing the world through the lens of the actual consumer. And it feels very much like you took a similar approach to this, which is, hey, we want to go from being reactive to proactive, but we also want to see the world through the lens of an actual user.
Well said, Jason. That's a very accurate way to depict our technology. We thought the infrastructure is there to serve the app, and the app is there to serve the user. So the truth has to be dictated by the end user. The world actually rotates around them in some way, if you think about it. By infrastructures not being reactive or not having the ability to adapt to the application to better serve the user, I think it's a bottleneck. So we thought, let's make our infrastructure adaptive, where it would learn from real users and would change itself so that it can service better the buyers of the e-commerce and the viewers of streaming. We want to change our infrastructure to adapt for the needs of the application, basically. So you're totally right. That's where truth gets dictated by.
Great stuff. Now, two final questions as we come to the end of our time together. How do you make your money? Like, how do you charge? How do you charge those e-commerce businesses that want to use and deploy your technology? How do you guys make your money, and how do they understand how much they're gonna have to pay to leverage your service? Now, I understand you got a lot of different modules, so I'm sure it's a little bit dependent on which services they actually take up. But if they want to just use that proactive CDN technology, what is your billing or pricing matrix model look like? And then secondarily, is your technology pretty much plug and play? So let's say I've got a Shopify or a BigCommerce store today, and I want to start using your technology tomorrow. How difficult is it to get up and running with your technology?
Perfect. So I'll start with the last one, and then I will actually go to the first question. So it's very easy to use our technology if you're on Shopify, BigCommerce, if you're on any, or you have your own web servers running in Amazon or Azure or Google. The only change we ask our customers to make is we ask them to change the DNS, and they make and we request them to point the DNS to us. We call them CNAME. So we would give them a CNAME. You point your top level domain or the domains that you want us to serve. You CNAME that to us, and we would, for starters, we would point it right back to your current CDN or to your current cloud. So basically, it's a no-op. And once we get that and we get the certificate from you, we get the service activated. Once the service is activated, then with our customers' permission, we switch the traffic to us. That's the only effort that's needed from our customers. Give us the certificate, point the DNS to us, and you're done. So in less than 30 minutes, you would be able to be up and running and drive home an additional 5 to 10% of revenue, depending on your site's performance. That's it's as simple. The first question is, I think you were asking our pricing. So our pricing is, it has two parts to it. One is the bandwidth side. When it comes to static content, we are very competitive. I believe that if you are in the static business, you have to be super competitive with all the CDNs in place. So our price is also ask like Cloudflare and fast. And then when it comes to the dynamic content, we made it super simple for our customers. We made it as a function of the page views. How many million page views you have? We have a ladder. So basically, if you're someone with a million page views, you pay, I think, in the neighborhood of $500 or something like that.
And that's per month, obviously. That's a monthly fee.
Per month, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, that makes complete sense. That's very straightforward. Now, if someone wants to get a hold of you and they want to learn more, are they best to simply go to Zycada, which is Zycada, or for my North American friends, Zyca? Are they best to just simply go to Zycada.com and check out all of your solutions there and find out more information, sign up, etc.? Or are they best to try to get a hold of you directly on LinkedIn? Or how do people best get a hold of you? And any other advice you have when people are looking for a CDN, just generically, when businesses are trying to understand web acceleration and trying to give their end users a much, much better experience. You might think, hey, we don't have any other competitors in the market, and maybe you don't, but what are the key things that they should really be looking for in any CDN solution that is a third-party solution?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, yes, they can go to www.zycada.com. They can come to LinkedIn. They can ping any of us. We believe that we are here to serve our customers. That's our mantra, if you will. That's our guiding light. So if our customers want us, they can reach us in any channel they want, whether it's our website, LinkedIn. We are here to serve them. Second point, in general, whether it's Zycada or any other CDN JSON, and the most honest acknowledgement of the problem came from the CEO of Cloudflare, which is even the best of the CDNs will have outage. It's an eventuality. The longer the time window that you stretch, typically you would see that the CDNs will have an outage. So we wanted to actually partner with the top CDNs. We want to help our customers by rolling out the service called Cdn Reserve. It's a no-brainer. We basically did that to get the goodwill of the customers, if you will. So if you're having a CDN, you're having cloud, if CDN is having an outage, which we typically see that the uptime for a CDN is about 98%, 99%. What that means is that you would have, over a period of a year, it's about a day or two worth of outage in totality. But even if you have if you're a $100 million business and you have outage for 1 hour, that's about $22,000 loss for you. So we did not want our customers to have that loss. So we rolled out this feature called Cdn Reserve. It's a simple, no-brainer, turnkey solution. What we basically do is if your CDN goes down, we automatically take the traffic and we wait till your CDN comes back up, and then we give the traffic back to the CDN. It's a simple insurance policy. So my biggest advice would be, if we are moved to a world where slow is the new outage, in that world, if being slow is not okay, having an outage is completely not. It's a business crisis.
Love it.
And
Love it.
we would, we urge our customers to take advantage of this. I know multi-CDN could be very expensive, which is why we rolled out. It's basically goodwill. We are practically, it's not like we make any money here, but it's a way for us to show that we care about our customers. So please check out cdnreserve.com. And we want to bring some top SREs to talk about this problem. Many customers are very happy about the service because they can now protect, and they have an insurance against CDN outage, because CDNs are important. If you don't have one, get one. If you have a CDN, get a CDN Reserve. Very, very important. You can't go wrong with it.
Wow. Very straightforward. Subbu, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it. You're extremely knowledgeable. Obviously, a lot more about this stuff than I do. So I appreciate your wisdom and sharing it with me and the audience. I learned a ton, and I'm sure that the audience of the pod also learned a ton. Really appreciate it. Wish you and the Zycada team all the best in the world. And I hope that you have a fantastic 2022. I think that in the age of the internet and COVID and websites being slammed like never before, technology like yours is going to help businesses to stay available for their customers, which of course is the most important thing in the world if you are a service provider. So thank you very much once again. Look forward to chatting with you again in the future, mate. Talk soon. Thanks for listening to the At the Coalface podcast. If you want more At the Coalface, you can subscribe to our premium e-commerce and digital newsletter, At the Coalface Digest.